Good evening. Well, Michael Gove today laying out a new definition of what is extremism. Let's hear what he had to say in the House of Commons earlier on today.
The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights, or intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results.
Well, I understand, that organisations, whether they're extreme right or Islamist, that are receiving government money, shouldn't receive government money if they're spreading hatred and extremism. That's the one part, perhaps, of this new definition that I agree with. But my concern is, could this be open to abuse? And when I think about it, if you attempt to undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy, well, you could be branded an extremist. And whilst that wouldn't make you a criminal, because this will not go into law that the police are going to enforce, it would take you out of public life. Well, I was elected 25 years ago to the European Parliament on a ticket that said we should leave the European Union. My first day there, Sir Stephen Wall, he was the representative for the Foreign Office in the European Union, came to my office, sat with the three of us from UKIP that had been elected and said, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" It was clear he thought we were an extremist terrorist group. And that's the worry with all of this. Even if you create a permissive environment for others to achieve the result of undermining democracy or fundamental rights. I mean, that could mean that you perhaps couldn't debate many issues on GB News if some took those arguments and went too far with them. So my concern with all of this is that I think it has the potential to be abused by governments that want to shut down debate on issues that they don't like. I think it is. We were told the new definition would be less woolly, and yet, from what I can see, it's completely and utterly open-ended. I'm sure that everybody on all sides of the political debate will argue that they're being victimised, but I think this is open genuinely to a shutting down of free speech, maybe not by this government, but who knows what may come in the course of the following years. So tell me what you think. Is it open to abuse? I'd love to get your views, please. Farage@gbnews.com. Now, one member of Parliament who was subjected to extremism, intolerable behaviour, was, of course, Tobias Ellwood, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Bournemouth East, with a mob of, I think, nearly 100 people for several hours turned up outside his house, shouting and chanting pretty hate-filled messages. Tobias, welcome back on the programme. Two things, really. One, I'd like to know what you think of this definition and whether you share my reservations about how it might be used in the future. And secondly, I don't think this definition actually helps MPs like you and would stop people gathering outside your house.
Well, firstly, good evening. And interesting you speaking about the European Union and reflecting back on that, going down memory lane. You and I agree on many things, and we both know that you and I disagree on many things, but we do it in a way that allows us to disagree in a form that allows debate to continue. I don't hate you for what you believe in. You don't hate me. The art of disagreeing remains strong between us, and that's so important. But that's not the case in what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months. And that's why there's this question that's being raised, bigger question, fundamental question about who we are, what we stand for, what it means to be British and to live here, what binds us together, and how do we defend our open and tolerant way of life, our liberal parliamentary democracy, as Michael Gove was just speaking about. And since those deadly attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October, tensions between communities, within communities have been rising here. We've seen rise in anti-Muslim and anti-Semitism, hatred. Even the business of Parliament has been affected. And as you just touched on, MPs have been targeted as well. It's led to that big speech by the Prime Minister outside Downing Street on the 1st of March, where he wanted to address the spread of hate and division. And of course, Michael Gove's speech today. So this has a security implication. That's what it's about. Because it's through these extremist groups that freedom of expression is being suppressed, actually. Hatred is promoted. And in the worst cases, youngsters with a scant understanding of the Quran are recruited, radicalized, often online, to carry out deadly terrorist attacks here in the UK. So I would not want to see people like yourselves ever gagged in any sense. But I hope you'd agree there's also responsible use of freedom of speech. That's something that we need to recognize.
Tobias, I absolutely agree with that. But the question is, does what is stated here, does it do the job?
I think this is an evolving conversation, and the fact that we're talking about it, nobody is on this list yet, as has been put forward by Michael Gove. Very interesting to see Labour's response as well today. They didn't condemn it in any way. They largely agreed with it. I think this is an evolving conversation. We've gone through this very, very difficult period, and we have big questions to answer. I never thought that we'd see legislation required to protect war memorials because nobody had ever challenged them before. We're now starting to do that because those behavioral norms are being tested in all court forms of our society.
Okay.
And so important then, therefore, we debate these things properly and as a nation decide what is right and what is wrong.
Okay, Tobias, thank you very much indeed. An evolving conversation is the view of Tobias Ellwood. I'm joined in the studio by Abdullah al Andalusi, the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative. Welcome to the programme. And Toby Young, the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Abdullah, there are some that say that this definition that Michael Gove put out today is aimed at Muslim groups. Do you believe that to be the case or not?
I think it was spurred on by the pro-Palestine protests that demanded a ceasefire against the massacre and plausibly a genocide against the
many would disagree with that.
Well, let's let the ICJ review it. They'll probably review it better than you. But the issue is this, that everyone seems to have a short memory. People don't remember the Countryside Alliance and the fox hunting demonstrations that ran riot in Parliament Square. They actually burst into Parliament. At one point, Simon Hart organised public harassment campaigns of the MPs. And guess where his position now? He's now Chief Whip under Rishi Sunak. So the Conservative Party has no problem with rallying the mob and using mob potential harassment of MPs as all part of democracy. But when it comes to movements
hang on, Abdullah, hang on.
Yeah,
I was there.
True? Yeah.
I was there.
Sure.
On the Countryside March.
No doubt.
You can be as rude as you like. That's fine. I was there on the Countryside March. 406,000 of us marched through London. There wasn't a single arrest. There was no disorder. There wasn't even a piece of litter left behind. And the difference here, and yes, I was involved in this. Not that I hunt, but I believe in people having the freedom to do within reason what they want. The difference is the lobbying of those members of Parliament wasn't intimidatory. What happened in Parliament Square the day that the SNP resolution was due to be debated is MPs were frightened to leave the building.
So are you denying that there was no riot in Parliament Square due to the
I'm telling you that I was on the country.
And there was actually it's literally called public harassment campaigns.
I wasn't there on that day. I was there on the big march. But the point is,
we're not talking about when you were there. We're talking about the historical record. You can check out the riot that happened.
If any group bursts in and behaves badly and threatens or intimidates, it should be, of course, the law should be enforced.
Well, my question
to you is: do you think this definition of extremism is helpful or not?
No, it's if you ban something which is to do with people's beliefs, that is not about inciting violence, then this is thought policing. And in the modern world, I often say that the term extremism, which is an unhelpful term, at least the Americans have the wherewithal to say countering violent extremism, not just extremism. But using the term extremism today is the modern secular version of denouncing heresy and heretics.
I get the point. It is dangerous, and it depends how it's used, and I agree with you on that point. Toby Young, Free Speech Union. I'm really worried about this. I do actually take Abdullah's point that people are perfectly entitled to their opinions. They're perfectly entitled to let their elected representatives know those opinions. It's a question of whether it's done with intimidation, isn't it?
Yes, and clearly this definition of extremism, it doesn't just encompass people who we currently think of, I think, as extremists and who might be captured by the criminal law. It's below the criminal law threshold. So it falls into the legal but harmful grey area, which is something, as a free speech lobbyist, I'm obviously suspicious of. I mean, I think the starting point, and I think I disagree with Abdullah here, is that we do have a problem with Islamic extremism in this country. We see it in our city centres every Saturday. I'm not saying everyone on the pro-Palestinian marches.
Totally right on that point. Do we have a problem?
But how is demonstrating to stop the massacre of civilians in Gaza anything to do with extremism?
I think. Go on. The answer is not everyone on those protests could conceivably be designated as extremists, but there are some extremists on those protests.
The vast majority of those are not extremists
on the back of their jackets.
And that may well be true.
Carrying jihadi flags.
But if there are people that genuinely are extremists and are inciting bad behaviour, then we need to know about it.
Then the police will arrest them. There's already existing legislation that will stop defacing of cenotaphs, that will stop people from inciting violence, inciting racism. That already exists. And we don't need any extremism.
Well, in some ways, maybe that point's right. Do we need this definition?
Well, I've got a sort of broad concern and then a precise concern. My broad concern is I'm not sure that there is a robust evidence base to suggest that if you define certain groups as extremist and you prevent them from participating in public life, which is essentially the strategy here, that will actually counter extremism. It hasn't worked very effectively before. In some cases, people can claim, look, I'm on a banned list, I'm an extremist according to the Tory government. That could actually enhance their appeal and make them more attractive, not less attractive to vulnerable young men in danger of radicalisation. So that's my broad concern. I'm not sure this works as a strategy for countering extremism. My more precise concern, and this is probably where we agree, Abdullah, is that the definition, I mean, the government can't come up with a definition that just captures Islamic extremists but nobody else. That could be too easily challenged.
Sure.
And the government clearly thinks it's not just a problem with Islamic extremists. There are some far-right extremists we should be worried about too. They point to Nick Griffin's endorsement of George Galloway, etc. But the problem is when they try and come up with a broader, more universal definition of extremism, the risk is it's going to capture groups that none of us would want to see banned from participation.
No, I agree.
Like anti-abortion activists, gender-critical feminists.
The worry with this, as to which groups are going to be deemed to be extremist, or perhaps which individuals will be deemed, is that it's civil servants that'll make the decision, and that worries me as well. Final thought.
I think there's one organisation that should be deemed to be extreme. They want to clamp down upon people's right to demonstrate. The whole point of demonstration is to give some kind of democratic pressure to politicians. That's the whole point of demonstrations. What's the point of them? It wants to clamp down. It wants to discriminate on organisations and individuals based on their beliefs, which goes against the Human Rights Act, Schedule 1, which is what the extremist definition is based upon, apparently. And this organisation is the British government. They found their own definition.
I think that may be stretching it a bit.
And I think, to be made for that.
But I tell you what, I mean, I could be in real trouble because there's an organisation out there called Hope Not Hate, and they've just produced their State of Hate 2024 report. And interestingly, they are indirectly funded significantly by government money, and their report this year, I mentioned 56 times, more than any other individual. GB News is mentioned page after page. And that's the other problem, isn't it? You know, that actually, if you're not careful, you start to use the cover of and the use of this word hate as a means of saying that, frankly, anyone you disagree with should simply be shut down. There are great risks to this. I think this is open to abuse. I rather sense that differing sides of this debate actually agree on some points. We have laws in place in this country. You know, the police's job is to enforce them. Many feel they've not been doing their job very, very well. I don't think this is helpful in any way at all, Mr. Gove, and I think it's open to abuse. Get your views after the break.